It's time to move. The city lights were bright behind the avenue.
She stood beside him on every stage, her voice lifting his higher, her presence quiet but unwavering. Yet when the curtains fell and the applause roared, no one remembered her name. Who was the woman whose voice helped shape some of Australia's greatest musical moments, yet remained invisible in the eyes of fame? Lisa Edwards wasn't just a backing singer. She was the emotional backbone of John Farnham's most iconic performances. For decades, she sang her heart out behind one of Australia's brightest stars, but the spotlight never turned her way. Was it loyalty, bad luck, or an industry that never cared to ask who the woman behind the harmony was? There's something haunting about a voice everyone knows, but no one can name. Lisa had the talent, the experience, and the presence, but the narrative never belonged to her. Some say she chose to remain in the background, others whisper of missed chances, overshadowed dreams, and unspoken frustrations. Behind every ovation Farnham received, Lisa stood just a few steps behind, applauding him with the world, hiding a story the world never heard. This is not just a story of a forgotten artist. It's a story about what it costs to stand next to greatness, about what gets lost when one star burns too bright, and about the price paid by someone who gave everything, yet received so little in return. Because sometimes, the greatest voices are the ones we never think to hear. Lisa Edwards emerged in the Australian music scene at a time when pop and rock were dominated by larger-than-life frontmen. The 1980s and 1990s were the golden era of arena concerts, televised music specials, and emotionally charged performances that defined a generation. Amidst all that glory, John Farnham stood as a national treasure, his powerful voice and boyish charm capturing the hearts of millions. But always, standing just a few steps behind him, was Lisa Edwards. With flowing blonde hair, an elegant posture, and a voice that could rival any star on the main stage, Lisa became a fixture in Farnham's live shows, music videos, and televised appearances. She wasn't just another session vocalist hired for a tour, she was his voice of harmony. From Age of Reason to Chain Reaction, Lisa's presence was constant, unwavering, and emotionally resonant. Her voice blended so seamlessly with Farnham's that many fans considered it a part of his sound. Audiences could recognize her silhouette beside him, see her in the background of every televised concert, and hear her voice rise during climactic crescendos. But while Farnham's fame skyrocketed, Lisa remained a background presence. The contrast was stark. Fans chanted his name. Journalists chased his interviews. Labels poured money into promoting his every move. Lisa, meanwhile, received little more than name mentions in album liner notes. No solo tours, no major press features, no real shot at her own stardom. Yet she remained loyal, committed, and almost invisible. People often say that in show business you either shine or disappear, but Lisa's story complicates that idea. She did shine, just never in a way that the industry chose to acknowledge. There are whispers in backstage corridors that Lisa once had opportunities to go solo, that producers saw her potential. But one way or another, those chances faded. Was it timing? Was it her own choice? Or was it the unspoken rule that the stage only has room for one star at a time? Her journey with Farnham wasn't just professional, it was emotionally entwined. The two had undeniable chemistry on stage, exchanging glances, harmonizing with instinctual grace. They made it look effortless, as if they were tethered by some musical thread. But behind that seamless performance lay years of unspoken compromise, of personal ambitions tucked away. As the 1990s gave way to a new millennium, Lisa remained in the same position. Respected, admired by peers, beloved by loyal fans, but still unrecognized by the broader public. She represented a quiet kind of brilliance, one that didn't clamor for attention, but deserved it nonetheless. In a world that worships frontmen and solo spotlights, Lisa Edwards was the anomaly. A woman who supported greatness, who was great herself, and yet was never allowed to claim the center stage. And perhaps that is where her story truly begins, not in the moments she stood behind someone else, but in the haunting silence of everything she could have been. Before she became the voice behind Australia's most iconic male vocalist, Lisa Edwards was a rising star in her own right. Born in Melbourne, she grew up surrounded by music. Her early years were filled with school performances, choir competitions, and a raw ambition that set her apart from her peers. She didn't just want to sing, she needed to. And by the time she reached her 20s, Lisa had already begun working with respected local acts, lending her voice to studio sessions and live gigs that sharpened her instincts and widened her reach. Her breakthrough came not through a solo hit, but through a connection, one that would change the trajectory of her entire career. In the early 1980s, she was invited to audition for a touring production that included backing vocals for John Farnham, who at that time was transitioning from his earlier Johnny Farnham image into a more mature, contemporary pop rock artist. Lisa's voice, textured and resonant, blended perfectly with Farnham's. The synergy was instant. He hired her on the spot. From that moment, Lisa became a permanent fixture in Farnham's ensemble. She performed on every major tour, appeared on iconic live albums like Whispering Jack, and helped shape the sound of classics like You're the Voice, Two Strong Hearts, and Burn for You. Audiences who watched those performances would see her, always to the left or right of Farnham, smiling, swaying, belting out harmonies with unshakable confidence. It looked like a dream job. But behind the polished performances, there were tensions that no microphone captured. As Farnham's stardom soared, the industry began to treat Lisa not as a collaborator, but as a fixture. Expected, interchangeable, and ultimately invisible. She was offered fewer creative opportunities. Producers stopped asking her for input. Even as her voice continued to elevate Farnham's performances, she began to feel the weight of stagnation. She once confided to a fellow musician backstage, "I'm always there, but never seen. Never heard from me, only for him." It wasn't just the industry that failed to see her. The public, too, became so accustomed to her presence that they stopped noticing it. Fans asked about her in passing, sometimes referring to her as the blonde singer next to John. Some didn't even know her name. It was a surreal kind of fame, one where your face is familiar, your voice unforgettable, but your identity remains unknown. Whispers of frustration began to surface. People who worked closely with Lisa noted that she had turned down at least 2 solo offers. One of them, a well-connected manager, reportedly said she could have had her own spotlight. But every time she was asked, she hesitated. I think she was waiting for something. Maybe permission. Maybe validation. The internal conflict became more pronounced in the early 2000s. Lisa was now in her 40s, still performing, still drawing applause, but more aware than ever that time was passing. Meanwhile, newer, younger backing vocalists were entering the scene, some of whom were being pushed forward, given small solos, encouraged to record their own tracks. Lisa, despite her years of loyalty and talent, remained in place. Then came a moment that many say was the emotional climax of her journey. A live television performance in which Lisa delivered a harmony so breathtaking that the entire audience rose in standing ovation before Farnham even finished the song. But as the cameras turned to John, he took a bow, smiled, and walked off. Lisa followed, unacknowledged. It wasn't malice, it was habit. The star bows, the voice behind him disappears. And in that moment, something changed. Lisa began to step back, not from music entirely, but from the idea that she would ever be more than what she had always been. A voice meant to lift others, but never herself. Her story so far had been one of quiet excellence, but the quiet was growing louder, and the price of staying in the background was beginning to show. For years, no one asked Lisa how it felt to live in the shadow of someone else's spotlight. But behind the gentle smile and effortless performances was a woman carrying the quiet weight of being forgotten in plain sight. The public never knew how many times she went home from sold-out shows only to sit in silence, wondering if her voice would ever be hers again, not just a tool to elevate someone else's fame. The truth is, Lisa Edwards had dreams beyond backing vocals. Friends close to her recall studio demos, beautiful, raw recordings that showcase the full depth of her voice and songwriting. One particularly haunting ballad, never officially released, was called Echoes Behind the Curtain. In it, she sings of applause that never reaches her, of lights that shine just inches away, but never on her face. It was, many believe, her silent confession. The song still circulates in rare bootlegs among loyal fans, a chilling reminder of everything she never said out loud. There were moments when the mask slipped. During a brief radio interview in the late 2000s, Lisa was asked whether she had ever considered a solo career. Her pause was long, uncomfortable. Then, softly, she replied, "I used to think I could, but then I got so good at being someone else's harmony that I forgot how to be my own melody." The host chuckled politely. But those who knew Lisa heard something else in her voice: resignation. Behind the scenes, the music industry wasn't kind to women like Lisa. Age, appearance, and marketability often mattered more than artistry. A former executive from her record label once said anonymously, "Lisa had the talent, no doubt. But she wasn't marketable in the way the industry wanted a female solo act to be. She didn't fit the image." It was an indictment of an industry that prioritized youth and spectacle over substance, and one that pushed gifted artists like Lisa into the margins. Some say the unspoken tension between her and Farnham grew over the years. While never public, insiders noted that Lisa eventually began declining certain gigs, choosing instead to mentor young singers or focus on smaller independent performances. She remained respectful, never speaking ill of John, but the distance grew. It wasn't anger, it was self-preservation. One former bandmate remembers a rehearsal where Lisa stood in the center of the stage for a sound check. Her voice filled the room. It was, he said, like hearing her for the first time, even though I'd heard her for 20 years. When Farnham entered, she quietly moved back to her usual place. And just like that, the moment passed. The media never picked up on these quiet battles. To the public, Lisa Edwards was part of the furniture, familiar, expected, and unchanging. But behind that perception was a woman grappling with the pain of being necessary but not celebrated, revered but rarely acknowledged. And though she never aired grievances or demanded credit, the emotional toll was undeniable. When Farnham's farewell tours began in the 2010s, Lisa was there. She smiled, she sang, and fans applauded. But in those final performances, some observers noticed a different kind of energy. Lisa no longer seemed to be waiting for recognition. She was closing a chapter, not with bitterness, but with quiet dignity. The public never got the tell-all interview. There was no scandalous memoir, no onstage confrontation. Lisa simply stepped back, gracefully, silently. And in doing so, she left behind a legacy that few noticed at first, a woman who gave everything to music, even when music never fully gave back. Now, years later, her name is starting to resurface, not as a footnote in someone else's story, but as a voice that deserved to be heard. And perhaps that's the cruelest truth of all, that sometimes the world only starts to listen once the voice has faded from the stage. At Aussie Uncovered, we don't believe Lisa Edwards was simply a backing vocalist. We believe she was the soul behind the stage, an essential part of Australia's musical legacy who never got her due. Her story is not just about music. It's about the silent sacrifices made by countless artists whose talent is undeniable, but whose names are never etched into the spotlight. Lisa wasn't a shadow. She was a force, subtle, steady, and deeply human. We've all celebrated John Farnham, and rightly so. He is a legend. But what makes a legend endure? Is it the power of a single voice, or the harmony that lifts it? Lisa's voice was that harmony. She brought texture, emotion, and richness to every performance, yet remained unnamed in every headline. It's a sobering thought, that a person can shape the soundtrack of a generation and still be invisible to it. There is a kind of quiet courage in what Lisa did. She stayed, she sang. She showed up night after night, tour after tour, even as the world looked past her. And while many would consider that a failure, a missed chance at fame, we see something different. We see integrity. We see strength. And we see a story that deserves to be told. Not as a side note, but as a centerpiece. Should she have pushed harder for the spotlight? Maybe. Should the industry have recognized her talent and given her the stage she deserved? Absolutely. But beyond the what-ifs is a deeper truth. Lisa Edwards chose to give her voice to something bigger than herself, even when the world refused to return the favor. And now, it's time we ask ourselves, how many other Lisas are out there? How many women, how many artists are quietly shaping brilliance behind someone else's fame? And why do we only remember the face in front, never the voices beside them? We invite you to sit with this story, to let it echo. Because Lisa Edwards was never meant to be a background character. She was a lead, just waiting for the world to listen. What do you think? Do you remember her voice? Do you feel she should have had more? Or do you think her legacy lies in what she gave, not what she gained? Let us know, because these voices, long ignored, deserve to be heard. Clearly, fully, and finally. Some stories are never told, but now you know. Lisa Edwards never needed flashing lights or magazine covers to leave her mark. Her legacy is woven into the very soundscape of Australian pop music, into harmonies that still ring in the memories of those who heard them live, into melodies that stirred hearts long before anyone thought to ask, who is that woman singing with him? For years, she stood behind one of Australia's greatest musical icons, not as a shadow, but as a foundation, and now, in hindsight, that foundation speaks louder than ever. Her story is not just about music, it's about resilience, about choosing dignity over recognition, about understanding that being forgotten does not mean being unimportant. When we look back on the golden age of Aussie pop, we remember the anthems, the faces, the headlines, but now perhaps we'll also remember the quiet power of Lisa Edwards, the voice that never faltered. The woman who sang not for fame, but for the song itself. Somewhere, someone is still humming You're the Voice, unaware that the chills they feel come from her harmony. That is her legacy. Not fame, not fortune, but emotions. Impact. Time has a way of rewriting history. Maybe now it's time to rewrite hers, not as a forgotten figure, but as an essential part of the sound that shaped a nation. Because in every echo of applause that once faded before reaching her, a new kind of recognition is beginning to rise. One that's quiet, yes, but finally, all her own.